go.
Oh, look, got it.
Okay, we're on, Jamie.
Here we go.
Well, I've got to say, your last episode was a real banger.
Oh, thanks, mate. Because that's my favourite stage is the painting and weathering. I'm sure it's most people's actually. It's almost, I think, subconsciously when you're editing and doing the narration and things, or even the filming, you're kind of putting a little bit more into it without even realizing. I had a bit of a nightmare because I realized that because obviously I did like you, it's the dual boxing, but I thought, well, I'm going to make both at the same time. I'll build one and then get it ready for paint. And then I build the other, get that ready for paint, and then I'll obviously paint them. But I filmed the interior and the construction of the 5B, and then I've forgotten which one I did. And I ended up filming the painting of the 5C. So the spotters will go, hang on a minute, he's painting a different version there. But
Yeah,
I think
I caught it. I caught it, but
but it's I think it was the more interesting scheme out of the two anyway. So I'm glad I did that. But yeah.
now, good day, my friends, and welcome in. Well, this is episode number 4 of our Malta Story, the buddy build between myself and Jamie Haggo. This is where we put it all together and make our bases, our diorama scenes. Well, of course, mine's going to be on Claude Weaver's Crashed Aircraft in the Surf, as this photograph shows. Oh, yes, we have a lot to do in this episode. We're going to build our base, we're going to make some water, we're going to paint some little guys. Let's get going. To begin, I just used some of the insulation foam, cut it to a size that was appropriate to the scale of the aircraft, and now I'm trying to make kind of this water scene here, so a little bit of a shoreline here. So I've marked off basically where the aircraft is going to be sitting onto this scene here. We're going to have to make some divots here so it gets kind of pushed down into the surf and the sand a bit. And now I'm just taking this knife edge and just kind of evening out some of the contours here. At this stage, it's just about trial and error. So we'll do a little bit of cutting. We'll put the aircraft in place. We'll see where it needs to maybe have a little bit deeper divots or some of the shoreline cut away. And I'm just, basically trying to look at that photograph or the couple of photographs we have of Claude's aircraft in the surf and try to get the same angles in here roughly anyway as I put together this scene. Now, finally, we get to some place that's about here, and I think this is going to look okay. I got to kind of push it down a little bit because I need that tail to stick up, and we're off balance at the moment, but we'll get taken care of that a little bit later. Now, as mentioned, this is going to be a surf scene, so we're going to be in the ocean's edge, the edge of the Mediterranean, on the shores of Sicily. So that means that we're going to be pouring some resin. Okay, and here we go with the resin pouring. Now, as you probably, if you used resin, you know this. If you have not used resin, you could probably guess that you need to be kind of careful with this stage. A few things can go wrong, very wrong if you're not careful. First off, I've added the sides, so I'm using just basically balsa wood. That will become the edge of my base here, so that will retain the resin. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I've sealed up or coated, made a barrier, if you will, of all the different materials here. So the foam, because if the resin gets on the foam, there's a good chance it will just kind of eat it away and sink on through. And of course, I've got these balsa wood sides, which the resin would just soak into as well. So I'm using Mod Podge here, which is just a real handy, basically almost like white glue, and just paint it on there. And this will dry, and this will create that nice barrier that I need in order just to seal everything up before I start pouring the resin. Once I ensure that I have everything nicely coated over with the Mod Podge here, I'll allow this to set aside and dry for, I think in this case it was about an hour, hour and a half, something like that. As soon as it stops being tacky, you're ready to move on. And then we're ready to go to the next step. Now, we'll go backwards slightly. I use the AK terrains mixtures here, so desert sand, and then I painted it. So we had a base, so as you see here right now, we have a base already in place. So I've got a little bit of the watercolor, I've got a little bit of the sand color here. Sorry, didn't get that on film, but it'll make sense here because we're going to continue on. Now I'm just using, this is a little bit rougher texture here, also AK terrains, but I'm just trying to build up that area where the aircraft is going to set. So this is actually going to, I'm going to squish the aircraft into place here, so that will start getting everything ready to go. So we'll take some clear wrap just to protect the aircraft. Now we can put it in place, and once we get it into the proper location, I'm just going to squeeze down, and that will become the setting place for this aircraft onto this scene. And so with that, let's take a look at what Jamie's been up to.
Hello and welcome to the final part of the Eduard Spitfire buddy build with a great friend of mine, Rick. And in this, my final part, I'm proper stepping out of my comfort zone. I don't normally do this at all, but I'm going to make a base. And I kind of have to really, because Rick is doing his Spitfire in a diorama, and I thought, you know, he's stepping well out of his comfort zone by doing an aeroplane, so I should do the same in my own way. Now, this stuff, this is actual desert. So I should say really, dirt from my desert, trademark. Little hello to another famous YouTuber who's way better at dioramas than I am. Now for actually the fun bit, and I thought this was going to be quite tedious, but no, it was a lot of fun. So getting some acrylic paint, I was just picking out all this kind of raised detail. So the bricks, some of the stones, and some of the smaller pebbles, with different sort of sandy, buff, stone type tones. Just going in backwards and forwards, sometimes going over multiple times with different tones, just to break things up a bit. But I do want to highlight these. I don't want them to be a little bit of a feature. I don't want them sort of disappearing, if you like.
I think you'd agree Jamie's doing a great job with his project. So let's return to this one here. So we've added that paste, basically the white paste there. We've got our impression. That's dry now, so now we have our impression where the aircraft is going to go. Now we're just back to pretty much just kind of cleaning up and getting this prepared to start pouring our resin. So I'm going to be, once again, using the desert terrains because it has a good color to it. And now I'll start adding color and kind of reapplying the same colors that we didn't talk about in the very first case. But you get the idea here. This is how it was done. And once again, lazy modeler here, just adding some drops of paint onto the surface itself. And I'll use a big brush with some, a lot of water on it and just start blending this all together. Well, as you can see, this is a really quick and easy way just to block in some colors. And these will be the colors that will be underlying everything else. Of course, we'll do a little work later on, but the basic ocean colors are sitting there. So we'll start to be able to pour resin over the top of that. Adding a little extra color to the sand here just to help blend some things together. And once this paint dries, now we're ready to start adding our resin. Okay, here we go. Chemistry 101. This is a 1-to-1 ratio here, so catalyst and resin. I've got a nice kitchen scale here, so it makes it nice and easy. You could measure it if you wanted to. And I'm going to just lightly tint the water itself, the resin, if you will. So just basically 1 drop of light blue in there. Stir that up. Try not to make too many bubbles. And this will be a couple of different pours here, but I've got actually the whole base kind of tipped away from me right now, so all the resin's kind of running to that front top edge there. And trying not to pour it on top of the airplane here. But I'm basically slowly but surely going to fill up that front edge where it slopes down with the resin, and this will become the basis of our water scene. Now, this is all well and good right now, but the aircraft, the model itself, is just kind of floating a little bit in the resin, so I'm going to have to put a little pressure on the nose here until the resin starts to cure, and it just takes a few minutes before it gets sticky enough to hold it in place. And you can see that right now as I just kind of tap down there and squish it into place. Like I said, just for a few minutes. And so then I let that just cure up overnight. Now here we are, fast forward to the next morning. This is always that little test, like, is it hard? Yep, it is hard. So it cured up just fine. We have a good pour here. We had no leaks, no trauma, no disaster. So that's good. Everything's secure in place. And now we're ready to start continuing on with our scene. A special thank you to all my amazing Patreon members for your incredible support. Your contributions help me continue to create content for this channel. If you're not already a member, I invite you to join our Patreon community. As a member, you'll gain access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early releases, and more. I hope you'll consider joining Patreon and supporting this channel. Thank you very much. Well, we'll get back to making the waves in the water here in just a second, but I do have some figures. I printed some little 1/48 scale guys here that we'll place onto the scene. And let me go through how I'm setting up my palette. This happens to be for the flesh tone, so I'm starting with the darkest shade that I'll be using. That happens to be a chocolate brown color, just a dark brown. Then I've got like a beige red color. This happens to be medium rust. And I'll put a drop of light rust. And so those are my basic skin colors, my flesh colors that I'll be using here. And then in order to kind of augment those, so to lighten up the colors, I'll also use ice yellow and ivory, and I'll put those to the bottom because, again, those are my lightening colors. So my flesh tone shades are the top, my light to lighten is to the bottom. And this lilac color is a really good color that will kind of desaturate some colors. And from time to time, I may use a little bit of black and red just to kind of bring out some details. Now, here's kind of the trick. It's not really a trick, but this makes it so much easier if you're doing a painting session. You take those dots and you start blending them from left to right. So you take one color to the next color to the next color to the next color. What you end up with is a nice gradient of colors across your palette, which makes it really easy as you're painting your figure to start, maybe on the dark side and work your way up, but find the actual color that you need throughout the process, and helps with the blending so much easier. You're not just always remixing colors, so to speak. So I'll put those together, make that little gradient across there, and then I'll pull some of those bottom colors, the lightning colors, up to the top, up there as well. So they'll have not only the shades of the flesh tones going across, but I'll also have some of my lightning colors or my highlight colors going across there as well. And then if anytime throughout the entire process of painting my little guys or whatever, and I need to mix more colors, well, I already have my dots sitting up there, or at least I can put another dot up there, and I already have an indication of my gradient going from left to right there from my darkest to my lighter, brighter shades. And like I said, this lilac color makes a really nice shadow color because it really deadens or desaturates the colors there. So this is something I've been playing with for the last little while here as I once again keep trying to work on my figures, and I found that to be very, very helpful in order to make sure that I can be consistent throughout the entire process. So here's my little guys. Got them sitting on a lid. Yep, that's just hot glue down there in the bottom, but holds them in place, and I can easily pop them off when it comes time. Now I decided to put a base color on here of that same chocolate brown or that dark brown color. You could use black if you want. You could certainly airbrush these on here, probably a better coat, but I don't like to clean my airbrush, and these guys are so small, so I just went ahead and painted them up. And then I gave it a bit of a dry brush with one of those medium flesh tones here, and that just brought out some of the details and established my highlights. So the kind of the zenithal light, doing it with a dry brush instead of using the airbrush. Now I've got my palette. You can see I've been working on some of these things for a little while here. It's gotten a little messier on the backside. But now I just start painting out these figures, working on their flesh tones first. And as I said, as we start moving through this, you'll see that my palette will change a little bit. So I'll use green tones. Same idea, make kind of a gradient map across the top of the screen here, or across the palette, and be able to use those colors nice and consistently. To finish up these figures here, in terms of just the figures themselves, that was kind of one of the bigger challenges here, is just finding something that looked appropriate. Of course, if you look at some of those original photographs, you've got some guys kind of standing around. They could be military guys, Italian army or whatever, or they could be civilians from the nearby towns. These guys work. I don't know if they're appropriate or they exactly. I'll put this paint bottle here, so it gives you a sense of scale. These guys are very, very small. Now that we got those guys ready to go, let's finish up with our base here. So this is the same rough textures. It's a non-tinted color, so that's why it shows up white on the screen. And I'm just going to use some pigment here, and we'll start tying everything together. So we have the airplane in place here. You'll see that in just a second in the resin. Now we'll start working on the beach, getting the sand worked up around the aircraft, maybe showing some trails or tracks where the crash might have happened. He skidded across the sand. Kind of controversy, kind of two different stories about at least how his aircraft ended up in that position. One story is he actually crashed into the ocean just offshore and it got washed back up. Other ones are that he came across and just skidded across the sand at the water's edge and stopped at that place. So I'm going to use, he started behind, skidded across the sand a little bit, so I'm going to make a little bit of indentations and tracks across there. Kind of filling around this a little bit because let's say he was in place, the water, maybe high tide, has come back and forth a little bit, so the sand has kind of worked its way around some of these parts of the aircraft, especially around the tail edges of the wings and such. And I'll just start working on this sand here, blending things back together, using those pigments quite a bit here now to start improving the sand colors and adding some variation. Okay, so this is the part that I've been kind of been apprehensive about getting ready to do this. I've never done ocean water before, surf, anything like that before. So this is a total experiment here for me in place. So here we go. So I'm using these gels, and these first gels are basically transparent. So I'm basically kind of building up the waves as they crash into the leading edge of the aircraft here. Now it looks white now. Once they dry, they go back to being transparent. I tried to add a little bit of white into this right now so I can get some white caps onto this, but as it dried, it just went back to too transparent. So now I thought, well, I've got some snow effects, and so maybe I can make some white caps using these snow effects, which is what I've done. So I'm using basically the waves that I created out of the transparent gel, adding some of these snow effects onto them, and then just with a damp brush kind of brushing them back and giving them that sense of motion as they kind of move towards the shoreline. Yeah, this is one of those times when everything could have come off the rails and gone so very wrong so quickly here because I had no idea how this was going to actually work out. But I think I'm getting to where I want to be with this. So you can see as I start working with it, it's starting to give that sense of motion with the waves coming into shore. So that's good. I've got my white caps. That's nice as well. So so far so good. It was about right now that I realized that I had all these extended high edges around my base, and I was trying to reach in there, do these waves, and I'm like, oh, why don't I just cut my base down? I got to do that anyway. So I cut my base down. Again, this is just balsa wood. Cut it down to waterline level, and I'll paint that up later with black here. Now, it's a little easier to reach in there with my tools and do things. Now, on these white caps and along the leading edge, I wanted to show a little bit of spray, I guess you would call it. So I've got some cotton ball right there and a little bit of white glue, and I'm just teasing out just the smallest hint of cotton and adding it to the top edges of some of these waves, just kind of soften those edges up a little bit and give a little effect of some spray coming off of those waves as they crash down. And of course, next up, well, we have some details to take care of here. So we have water waves coming up against the aircraft here, so we need to make some kind of wet marks here, some moisture stains on the front edges here. So, you know, I've seen pictures where the waves are coming all the way across this aircraft, you know, a high tide, let's say. I'm going to make more of a low tide sort of situation here, so we're just going to darken up those front edges, add some little splashes here and there. This is just oil paint, so I'm using the same oil paints I used in the weathering, just using the darker blue colors and such in order to show some of the moisture. And then on the rear side or the tailing edge of the plane, well, let's pretend like I said that this aircraft he's skidded across the sand and people have been walking on it, souvenir hunters, guys taken in prisoner, all the rest of that stuff. So once again, back to the oils, using some of those same colors that we used to weather the aircraft, same sand colors I've been using in order for the beach scene itself, and just adding a little extra dirt and dust tones here. once we have all this ready to go, we'll get everything kind of integrated. I've got my little guys, played around with them, decided these are the good positions for them. Just making a few final adjustments. I've stuck them in place just using white glue. And then I just wanted to go ahead and kind of dirty up their shoes just a little bit and get them so they look like they're part of the scene instead of just being plopped on the scene. And we're getting close to being finished here. So let's take another little break here and see what's going on with me and Jamie. I see we've got about a minute left, so
Yeah, pumpkin time.
yeah, it is pumpkin time.
Well, in summary, this has been brilliant. It's been such good fun.
Yeah, it has. It has been a lot of fun. And like I said, I think people have really enjoyed watching us just kind of do the banter back and forth, showing off each other's works, talking about it. I know that I've learned a lot, which has been brilliant on my side. It's just to watch you do your thing and learn so many little tricks. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Oh, no worries, mate. It's an absolute pleasure. And some of your sort of armory type techniques I'm going to take forward as well.
Good. Okay, well, let's cut off before this cuts us off. Take care, Jamie. Safe travels.
Hey, speak soon.
And I really hope you've enjoyed this series as much as I have. I've had such a lot of fun. Spitfires are always great, but the chance to do some Spitfires in some unusual schemes, to go to town on the weathering, and then to finish it all off with the base and doing it alongside Rick, learning from him, the dyed-in-the-wool armour sci-fi diorama guy. I've really picked up quite a few really neat little hints and tricks that I'm going to use on my next model. So I'll leave you with a bit of a montage, and I'll see you on the next project. So thanks very much for watching. Pop over and have a look at Rick's as well, and I'll see you then. So cheers, bye-bye.
And now this brings us to the end of my project as well. Well, I've really got to say thank you to Jamie. He's the one who thought about this, who invited me to the buddy build, suggested the Malta aircraft. He went outside of his comfort zone in terms of putting it on a small base. Of course, I went out of my comfort zone building a Spitfire, an airplane, and then further made myself uncomfortable by making waves. But I think it's all turned out. I had a blast doing this. Here are some final photographs, of course. There's some nice ones in here too, so we show even a black and white photograph that I've transposed onto the original photograph, and I have to say, here we go, that the angles are actually pretty darn close, so that surprised me because I wasn't trying too hard to replicate the angles, but it turned out really good. So I'm pleased the way this turned out. I hope you've enjoyed this series. I've had a lot of fun, as I mentioned. If you do like this channel, please hit that like and subscribe. Really do appreciate your support. More stuff coming in the future, of course, so until the next time, everybody, happy modeling.